Love is in the air, everywhere I look around. Love is in the air, every sight and every sound. And I don't know if I'm being foolish, don't know if I'm being wise, but it's something that I must believe in, and it's there when I look in your eyes.
Well, that's the record. What do you think, Cliff?
Tremendous. It's gonna go.
It's good fun, isn't it?
Oh, it's the best you've ever done.
Do you like the violin solo?
EMI manager Cliff Baxter and his producer David Mackay know it's the best thing they've done, but how do they convince the public, and in particular the record-buying teenagers? What they've got is a song called Sadie the Cleaning Lady and an unknown singer named Johnny Farnham.
Sadie, the cleaning lady.
For every John Farnham who makes it, there are 1,000 others who fall along the way. The key to commercial success is having the right song and the right look at the right time. It's called the pop dream.
I always loved singing. I mean, I loved it when I was even little. I was like 8 or 9, singing to Grease, thinking, or wishing that I could be Olivia Newton-John.
A lot of people say that they thought about girls and, you know, drinking and having parties and the glamorous lifestyle, but it hadn't really even occurred to me that that was part of the musical process. It was really came from the song.
When I was a kid, I thought everybody wanted to be a pop star, actually. I didn't really think it was a strange career choice. I thought everyone wanted to do it.
The business of star making is driven by breakthrough moments that make careers and change lives. They come about through talent, persistence, and sometimes luck.
I go to the APRA dinner every year, which is the songwriters' dinner. And so every year people are successful, and then 2 years later they're bitter, you know. So, God. So it is like the war, you know, you get the young guys go off and get chewed up, and then next.
We used to sit around every Sunday night, like the rest of Australia, and watch Countdown. And it's like, that's what I want. I want to be on Countdown. Once I'm on that, I'll know I've made it.
The teenage radio stars, I want to be your baby.
I remember the first time we did Countdown. We did our song, and it was kind of like over in a blink. And then I got out and out of the ABC and got in this really crappy old car and drove home and ate I think I had to borrow money to buy a pie or something. And I went like, it doesn't add up here, you know?
We were complete opportunists. You know, the whole thing of selling out, people would say, oh, you've sold out. We'd say, you know, just tell us where to sell out and we'll, you know, we'll be there.
You can't go to school to learn about this thing. You can go and get a PhD in mathematics or business management and to get all that. But the music business is actually governed by people that have lived by their gut feel.
Why is a band that hasn't sold a record in its life before worth a $500,000 advance on a first record, where one might be worth $200,000 advance? Who said this? It's perception, and the whole idea of building an act is to build a perception, meet it with an actuality, build another perception, meet it with an actuality, and that's where the thrill is in the business, and that's what the good people do.
Kylie Minogue's journey from soap star to pop princess started on the set of Neighbours. A scripted jam session was the moment that triggered her real-life pop destiny.
I mean, we're always on the lookout for new talent, and thanks to Scott here, we might just have struck gold with you.
Me? You want me?
That's right.
I could be a singer.
That's great.
So we formed this little band, and I said, oh, why don't we do Locomotion? Everyone knows Locomotion, and did it. Very, very pop fairy tale stuff. There was a guy who worked at the TV station where we shot Neighbours and produced a music show, and he came up to me afterwards and said, oh, that was really good, you should make a record. And I do recall thinking, oh, I could make a video. I was really excited about the video. So I did record a demo of Locomotion, and the demo vocals were the vocals that stayed on Locomotion, which became a hit around the world.
Kylie's demo landed on the desk of Mushroom Records' Amanda Pellman.
Listening to Locomotion as a demo the first time, the first thing that struck me was how great the song was. That to bring back a song like that was just genius. It wasn't about writing some, you know, 3 chords and the truth. It was a fantastic song, and she sang it brilliantly.
Charlene's popularity was a two-edged sword for Kylie. It gave her an instant audience and an instant image problem.
We'd go to the Triple M network here, or we'd go to you know, Eon FM, any of those stations, and they just didn't want to touch it because I guess they figured their advertising dollars was still in a male, you know, 20-year-old market. It wasn't about girls and kids and fandom still.
The pop industry is no place for the faint-hearted. Amanda Pellman wasn't fazed by the blokey attitude of FM radio.
You make a pop song a hit record with guts and determination and being a bossy cow like I am.
Locomotion went to #1 without radio airplay. It was the biggest Australian single of 1987 and Mushroom Records' biggest ever selling single.
Kylie enabled us to start selling records on an international level, and I mean, as great as it was living in Australia, a gold album in Australia is 35,000 copies. I mean, that's not going to pay a lot of bills. So when we started to sell millions of albums with Kylie, all of a sudden the pressure, which is something that used to get me down, and that was dealing with the bank manager every single week of my life. I can hopefully say I'll never have to do that again. And to those people out there that are still struggling with it, it can change real quick.
Mushroom sent Kylie to London to record a follow-up song with legendary hitmakers Stock, Aitken and Waterman.
Come on in, guys. This is the old hit factory. Kylie Minogue, Jason Donovan, absolutely everyone in this building. This is my partner, Steve Burden.
How are we doing, all right?
But yeah, back in the day, it was obviously Stock, Aitken and Waterman doing their thing here. Now it's us. As you can see, we've got singers, bands in here.
This possibly could have been one of the more passionate corners that Jason and Kylie used to frequent. But as I say, this all could be rumour.
Stock, Aitken and Waterman were the hottest producers of the day, selling over 37 million records before Kylie arrived at their door. They had little time for a young Aussie soap star.
Having been sitting in a hotel for 10 days waiting for me to call, me blissfully unaware that she was even in England, and I rang Pete and said, Pete, you've forgotten to tell us something. And anyway, finally, I say hello to Kylie, and I kind of have to do a very quick analysis of what I'm dealing with here. And I find out she's 19, I find out she's in this soap. She's very successful in her country, she's doing this, she's doing that, and she sings, and she's gorgeous looking, and all those. So, you know, I thought, well, she must have something wrong. And I thought that maybe she wasn't going to be lucky in love. It took about 40 minutes to write and less to sing it, because she's extremely quick. I mean, her ear is very tuned in, so I sang her the tune and she sang it back at me. And at that point, I put the tapes aside and went on to other things. I mean, that particular day, I had Banana Rama in the morning. She was in at lunchtime, mid-afternoon, and then by the time I got rid of her, Rick Astley came in.
15 million Britons hooked on Neighbours helped push I Should Be So Lucky to the top of the UK charts. Kylie's hit made Stock Aitken and Waterman realise they had been too offhand with their newfound cash cow.
And we treated Kylie rather shabbily. She came to London to work with us, and on the last day I get her in for 40 minutes and then tell her to go back home, you know, God. And then it's hit. It's #1 for 6 weeks, and somebody says, well, what's the follow-up? Sorry, I've had to go to Melbourne and crawl. I went to Kylie's home, apologised for the way we treated her. I told her it wasn't my fault, and would she please come in the studio again and record some more tracks, so we've got a follow-up. And of course, I mean, Kylie was reasonable about it, but I think quite logically she didn't think too much of us.
The grovelling paid off. Got to Be Certain became Kylie's 3rd hit in a row. Locomotion also made the US top 5. Kylie Fever had crossed the Atlantic. World domination seemed just another hit single away. Kylie wasn't the first to realise that America is pop's holy grail. It's the biggest single market and the toughest place to crack.
Can you guess where I'm calling from? The Las Vegas Hilton. I know it's hard to hear, it's just the echo on the line. Yes,
the first Australian group to really make it in the US was the Little River Band. Their success had a lot to do with manager Glenn Wheatley's faith in his band.
I had some terrible rejections. There's a chap called Artie Mogul, who's the president then of UA Records. Artie discovered Bob Dylan, so this man's a legend. I walked in there to present the tape then of Little River Band, and it was one of those situations where he's sitting in his big high chair and he's threaded the tape, and I couldn't see him because he got his back to me by this stage. He pushed the start button, I'm waiting and waiting for the reaction. There's no reaction at all. I'm starting to get very panicky about all of this. Finger comes out and stops it. Halfway through, It's a Long Way There, the opening track, a song I was very proud of. I mean, this was an 8-minute piece that we had put a lot of work into. And he turned around to me and he's going like this to me. He said, "Kid," he said, "you ever run your fingernails down a blackboard?" He said, "That's what that music does to me." Well, I ran out of that office so quick and in such distress because he was the discoverer of Bob Dylan telling me it's like running your fingernails down the blackboard. So I had to ask myself, was I that wrong? Did I really, was I missing this completely? Was it that bad? The answer was, I didn't believe it was. And I just sat there in that car park, I gritted my teeth, I said, I'm going to show these guys.
Curiosity killed the cat. I'm telling you, I know where it's at.
Glenn Wheatley's master plan was to synchronise Little River Band's career at home and overseas.
You've got to give it to Little River Band. I mean, you've got to give it to Wheatley. He got the international deals together so that when Curiosity Killed the Cat came out here, it came out there at the same time. The day they started, they were as big in Dallas as they were in Grafton.
want to be in a band that's respected and liked, and we're certainly building that sort of foundation in America. I mean, the whole business are right behind us. Even other record companies come up, you know, and say to you, "Wish we had you," you know, and all that sort of stuff.
That's the way it began. We were hand in hand, and Miller's band was better than before. We yelled and screamed for more.
There were times when I thought we're not getting there, but it was by the time that we'd gotten into reminiscing, and I'm sitting at my apartment in Marina del Rey, and it was late in the afternoon, and I got the number that we'd bolted into number 3. I had this little slight scotch and sat there on my balcony and I just thought, we've actually done it. We've actually cracked this market. I mean, I'm now number 3 on that Billboard chart, the Bible of my life, and it was a tremendous feeling, and I knew from there on we wouldn't look back, and we didn't.
Reminiscing has become one of the most listened to songs in pop history. It's been played on American radio more than 4 million times.
We'll go dancing in the dark, walking through the park and reminiscing. So won't you tell me, won't you tell me the truth? Are you old enough? And I'm thinking about my baby. Are you old enough? Are you old enough?
In the mid-70s, Dragon held the unofficial title as Australia's Bad Boys of Pop. Like LRB, they had the talent and songs needed to make it overseas. The one thing holding them back was themselves.
In this country, you've got to have your money or your attitude. And it was obvious to us we were never going to get any your money, so we just had the attitude. And people would say, "Smile, come on, here's a photo session." We'd just say, "Nah, you, we're just going to please ourselves." Which was great, which was what was good about it, you know. However, it was sort of magnificently stupid.
Mark and Todd Hunter's pop harmonies set Dragon apart. In early 1976, the group attracted the attention of producer Peter Dawkins.
The president of CBS, Dick Asher, was in town, and he'd given me the brief of getting something happening. And the only thing I'd found was Dragon at this point. So I took him down to the Recovery Wine Bar. So you got all these limousines pulling up at the front of this scungy old wine bar. And a band, you know, with just Mark Hunter standing out the front, you know, being the real smart-ass, as he always was. And, but the charisma was there, and the songs were there. And it was just like hearing one hit song after another. And Dick Asher said, "Good boy, good boy." So we signed them.
Most of Dragon's early hits came from the eccentric songwriting genius of keyboard player Paul Hewson.
We'd set off for a 6-month tour, and he would have his little blue Globite bag. And I'd say, "What's in your Globite bag, Paul?" And he'd open it, and there'd be, you know, cough medicine, wrestling magazines, chess books, and a chess set. Fabulous.
A Caribbean chess tournament was Hewson's unlikely inspiration for Dragon's first big hit, April Sun in Cuba.
We played it live once at the, I think it was at the Rooty Hill RSL, and first time people heard it, they went berserk. So we knew just that riff, the actual guitar riff, people loved it.
They did the usual in and out of the studio, And after they left, I put the jungle noises on the front, sort of sped up and slowed down jungle noises. I put a steel guitar and strings going boing. I thought they'd be very happy with it. But of course, they were very shocked when they heard it, and they said, "We're not going to promote that record." And I said, "Well, everybody loves it." And it just rolled on, it went out, and it was, I don't think it was number one. Mull of Kintyre was number one. And there was no way you could beat that.
Dragon's rise coincided with the birth of the video clip. Music was starting to be seen as well as heard.
At that stage, I think Australia led the world in videos to promote pop singles. In America, they were mainly shown to salesmen at conventions and things like that.
Yeah, Russell Mulcahy directed the April Sun in Cuba clip, and we only had $3,000 budgeted to pay him, and it came out at $3,500, so we gave him $500 worth of records.
CBS patted themselves on the back because they went out and bought footage of the sun rising. And I remember that's added incredibly to the extravagance of this video, you know, a couple of seconds, milliseconds of the sun coming up. Then it was some other special effect that they zapped Mark's dark glasses with some sort of effect, and that was like, whoa, this is the front end of technology here.
The more successful Dragon became, the more out of control they got.
I was quite a catastrophist in the end, where I'd think, OK, we're going into the situation, what's the worst thing that could happen here? OK, right, and there's something about 5 times worse would happen, you know, someone would die, or, you know, unimaginable crap would go down. So it was hilarious. That sort of just, but ultimately it was quite a wearing thing to, you know.
Dragon's self-destructive streak ended their one big chance to make it overseas. It all went wrong at a make-or-break gig in Dallas, Texas, in front of a crowd of American record executives.
So I went down there and just sort of gave them a good talking to before they went. I said, "Come on, don't blow this one, boys. This is your big chance." And it was a place called the Armadillo Room, and it was a tin roof, 100 degrees, big Texans all drinking jugs of tequila.
The foldback engineer was over there, Mark was saying, you know, I want more foldback. And then the guys down the side of the stage were going back to him, and he'd go, oh, you know, well, OK. And then everyone started going, who are these guys? You.
Mark took it upon himself to announce to the Texans that we had heard that oral sex was illegal in the state, and what a bunch of weaklings. Well, he didn't say it in those terms, but what a bunch of wankers the Texans were.
The stuff started showering across the footlights, you know, cowboy boots. It was like a sort of slow-mo thing, you know, whole ice buckets with this champagne bottle, and the ice would come, you know, through. And Mark got up on the tables and waded out into the spotlight. You know, and he was there in this crucifixion pose.
The portrait rep who was with me said, "You better be careful, mate, because last time I was here, I got shot in the leg."
And I look around at roadies, sort of, you know, they've got money's going back and forth about, you know, if he's going to get shot or not. We get backstage and Mark says, "What do you reckon? How we do?"
James Freud was desperate to achieve the overseas fame and fortune that Dragon let slip through their fingers. His first step was a full pop makeover.
I had to totally reinvent myself. My hair, everything was wrong, so I dyed my hair. I became Gabriel for a while and wore this fur coat and, you know, walked around playing 12-string folk songs and you know, so, "Hi, I'm Gabriel," and I got really tired of that after a while. So, and then I finally found James Freud, and he became a Swan supporter.
Freud's pop transformation paid off with a top 10 hit.
As she crosses the floor, she knows. What does she know? She's seen it before, and she goes. Where does she go? There she stood, this fancy fashion creature, and composer, because I fell in love with a modern girl.
Modern Girl, I always knew would be a hit. As soon as I wrote it, it just said, "This, I'm a hit." You know, record me really well. I think I wrote it in about 2 or 3 minutes. Some people would say it sounds like that.
Coming up now, we've got James Freud's Radio Stars, and who recently did the Gary Newman tour here in Australia. Gary Newman was quite impressed with the band and did some recording with James and the guys. And in fact, James has now gone over to Japan to spend some time with Gary. I'm not going to touch that.
Well, we did a tour in Australia supporting Gary Newman, and he really liked us. He liked the sort of songs I was writing, so he offered to produce our album.
And he said, why don't you come over to England and make an album with me? I thought, yeah, okay, fantastic. He said, yeah, you can stay at my house. And I went, great, he's just had #1 records. And we got there, and it was his mum and dad's house that he'd grown up in, and took me through the house, and we kept going and out into the back, into this caravan that was, suddenly I was trailer trash.
And how are you and Gary going on this album?
Well, we finished it on Saturday. It took us 2 weeks to do, but we've had to listen to it, and there's a few extra things we'd like to put on it. So we're going in.
The album, produced by Newman, never saw the light of day. But James Freud still had one last chance to make it overseas.
They flew over these record company executives from Germany who wanted to give me a great record deal. And for some reason, I don't know, I have this self-destructive streak in me. I decided that I wasn't going to play Modern Girl, which was the hit, the single. And so the band said, why not? I said stuff them, I'm not going to play it. And so, the record company guys just left in disgust, and we didn't get a deal. We fell out with our manager. I fell asleep on the phone talking to Michael Gudinski because I got so drunk, and it was a disaster, really, from go to woe.
It's not often a group breaks through with its debut recording, but Air Supply did just that in 1976.
Air Supply were the only band I ever signed off a demo tape. And they played me this tape, and Love and Other Bruises was on the tape. I went, wow, this is great. And I said to Graham, I said, have you got any more songs? He said, I've got about 2,000. I said, gee, that's good. So I offered them a contract on the spot, literally pulled it out of the drawer. I said, take this away and get your lawyer to have a look at it or whatever you got to do. And we did the single, and then I started going through demoing the 2,000 songs, but they were all the same song.
One of the guys at CBS said, if you stay here, we can make you the biggest band in Australia. And we said, we don't want to be the biggest band in Australia, we want to be the biggest band in the world,
Tell me we can stay.
Air Supply got their chance to be the biggest group in the world through the persistence of singer and producer Robbie Porter. But it was almost too late by the time he got them their American record deal.
The band had broken up in Australia when I got the deal with Arista. And Arista was the 15th company that I went to 14 companies turned out the Song of the Year.
Air Supply had gone their separate ways when Lost in Love started moving up the charts. Songwriter Graham Russell stumbled across the news in a record magazine.
And on the front it said, Lost in Love, destined to become a top 5 hit. And initially I thought somebody had recorded it, and I thought, oh, that's just our luck. Somebody's recorded a song called Lost in Love, And I kind of got a bit down about that. And it said, turn to page 5. I turned to page 5, And there's a half-a-page article on Russell and I's picture of us right there. That lifted my spirits no end. And that's how it all started, you know.
Their surprise hit brought the band back together. It was the start of an extraordinary run of success for Air Supply in America in the 80s.
Air Supply in 1980 became the first Australian band to have 3 songs in the American National Top 3 in 1 year. Every Woman in the World got to number 3. Lost in Love got to number 2. And at number 1, this one, All Out of Love.
I'm all out of love. What am I without you? I can't be too late to say that I was so wrong.
I'd rather stay in Australia. I mean, if I can stay here, I'll be much, much happier, and I think much better off because, you know, I'm amongst the people who I love.
It's just no good anymore since you went away. Now I spend my time making rhymes of yesterday.
John Farnham has never wanted to try his luck overseas. In the 60s and 70s, he didn't have to. He was our biggest solo pop star. But by the early 80s, that was mostly just a memory.
At that time, I couldn't get a record deal for John Farnham for anything. There wasn't a record company in this country or internationally that was prepared to sign Johnny Farnham. And so poor old Johnny had this dreadful image to live down from his early pop days, his early king of pop days. And it is a legacy that is sometimes very difficult to shake, no matter how talented you are. John had to reinvent himself, there's no doubt about it. It was his second bite at the cherry, and he went through a very emotional time because he put his heart and soul into Whispering Jack. And that tension when he delivers it to you, and I remember the cassette that it was in those days, the handwritten on there saying, dear boss, this is the best that I can do, good luck, and just signed it, and I've kept that ever since. I mean, what he did was he was handing over what was his best that he could do. And I had to go and get a deal, and he knew that I was getting rejections every... Because if it had John Farnham or Johnny Farnham on it, we knew that they'd just instantly say, we don't play Johnny Farnham.
Once you've made it in America, you'll always maintain a level. Here, gone. And then you've got to fight your way back up. He was always going to come back. But in reality, it should never have gone away. The guy was always... All of a sudden, he wasn't any better than he was there, you know, but that's us. That's Australia. Kick them when they're down and bury them and forget about it.
There was a rumour going around that RCA had pressed only 5,000 copies of the album in the beginning. I think that is a rumour. I don't think that they pressed anything like that.
Especially for you, I want to tell you I was feeling that.
Charlene's wedding was a neighbour's highlight and a career turning point. It allowed for Charlene to leave Ramsay Street and for Kylie to concentrate on her music. The catalyst for the next stage of Kylie's career was the new man in her life, Michael Hutchence.
Michael, when he started going out with Kylie, I couldn't actually believe it. I thought he was joking. But Michael was actually really, really good for Kylie.
I'd say that he must have learned a few things from her, but she came out of it as a woman, and she came out of it as a much stronger character with a lot more ideas.
Michael Hutchence wrote Suicide Blonde for Kylie. He also pushed her to take control over her career and to take risks.
A lot of the change was to do with Michael because he encouraged me to do what I wanted to do. And it's almost like I was on the verge of taking that step and he helped me to take it.
I didn't notice that working with Kylie, because to be honest with you, you know, I didn't really notice anything about her private life. On the day that she was due to arrive, I'd have to have a song ready. So at the time we were doing something like Better the Devil You Know, and she happened to be going out with Michael Hutchence. Well, we were growing up for her anyway in the music that we were making. You couldn't stay at I Should Be So Lucky. We knew that anyway.
Kylie was reinventing herself, surrounding herself with the best choreographers, stylists and video makers. Part of her makeover was to go from nice to naughty. Video director Paul Goldman oversaw her transformation.
I remember Kylie expressed the desire to make a video that was controversial, and she wanted to break with her image at the time, which was of this sweet, young, I guess still very much in the shadows of Neighbours in some way.
I would say Better the Devil You Know is, it always comes to mind first because it was a real turning point for me, and it was the first video, the first single cover where I actually handed the product to the record company and said, well, this is what I've put together, and it was almost, well, they didn't have much choice really. If they weren't happy with that, there was nothing else.
It made the front pages of English papers because there's scenes in there where she's seemingly naked in the arms of a black man. It wasn't the Kylie they knew. It was also the first video where she wore her famous hot pants. And it's kind of this bacchanalian video, which she had never done before. Yeah, it was an almighty turning point. I mean, Stock Aitken Waterman died when they saw it. I know. I got a phone call in the early hours of the morning telling me that I'd absolutely destroyed their baby.
Personally, I think she moved too quickly from Girl Next Door to, you know, raunchy sex goddess. And she never, ever needed to do that. Still doesn't. I mean, she's sexy just being herself, isn't she?
Kylie's next step to take control was to cut her ties with Stock Aitken and Waterman. But she needed the help of her Australian record company.
It sort of weakened my own position with Kylie, but I made a commitment to her that I'd get her out of that deal, and it took us a long time, and we did get her out of that deal.
Australian music export earnings doubled at the start of the 90s, driven largely by Kylie's growing success.
And all of a sudden, Kylie Minogue was selling out theatres, and this really began to really take its toll on people. A lot of the real knockers had to shut up.
Kylie was developing a keen business sense. The backing band for her 1990 tour was recruited from among Michael Hutchence's friends, including James Freud.
At the end of the tour, we got our tour bonuses. That was in Bangkok, and the manager came up and he said, you know, Kylie couldn't make it to the end of tour party. He said, you know, there you go. Kylie said, you know, have a drink on her. And it's like, wow, $100. Well, thanks, you know. I mean, my roadie on that tour, he worked for Sting. And at the end of the Synchronicity tour, or one of them, Sting came up and gave him a brown paper bag and said, there you go, mate, you know, thanks for everything. And, you know, it was $10,000 US cash, you know. Even Ivor Davies gives good tour bonuses.
She came all the way from America. She had a blind date with destiny, and the sound of Tiawa Voodoo had a truly sacred ring.
Like Little River Band a decade earlier, Crowded House's game plan was to concentrate on the overseas market.
The mission statement was to get a deal overseas before we'd done anything, so that when the record came out, it was all in sync. Because I think a lot of Australian bands had very obviously suffered from, at the time, that staggered approach to a successful record. It's one thing to wait 6 months or a year for your album to come out in the rest of the world, but what that means is, no matter how well it does, is that you're behind yourself creatively. You really should be moving on to something new at a point where you're going out to promote something old.
Crowded House had already approached Capitol Records in America before the local music industry got in the picture.
I got a call from a guy called Tom Wally at Capitol. We decided that we'd do a 50-50 joint venture deal, which was quite unusual, and I had to then convince my people that it was a good idea. And then Tom flew out for their first performance, and they were playing at the Tivoli. And I remember thinking, I think I may have laid an egg here. But, I mean, as rough as they were, Neil Finn's songs were just great.
Smiling as the ship goes down, you can tell a man from what he has to say.
Neil Finn's songwriting drove Crowded House's success. But those songs might not have been heard without the support of great videos.
How you broke pop records in the 1960s was absolutely through radio. It was the teen medium. By the 80s, we were dependent on television because music was not just about audio file anymore. It was all about vision, and what you saw was what you got.
Don't Dream It's Over was the single and the video that broke Crowded House in America.
What an amazing video that was. Come on. I mean, that was one of the videos at MTV. I remember all of us, the 5 of us who were on the air and the executives, that was one of the videos that we pointed to and said, see, this is what you can do. This is what, when video really works, this is what can happen.
Now I'm walking again to the beat of a drum, and I'm counting the steps to the door of your heart. Only shadows ahead, barely clearing the roof. Get to know the feeling of liberation and release. Hey now, don't dream it's over.
They had this sense in my head, I related it to kind of the Beatles. They were cheeky. They were funny. They made you chuckle. They made you smile. They made you feel warm. They were having a genuinely great time, it was clear, and I think that was contagious.
It's only natural that I should want to be there with you. And it's only natural that you should feel the same way too. It's circumstantial. It's something I was born to.
Suddenly, we realised we had a profile of these wacky guys from down under. We were being tipped as these wacky guys from down under, and everyone wanted us on their TV show.
Nick, can I wear a pair of your shoes?
Yeah, I'm gonna get dressed.
I didn't bring mine.
Yeah.
Crowded House always seemed on the verge of global pop supremacy. They chased success across the Atlantic, but were never big in the UK and the US at the same time. In the end, worn down by life on the road, drummer Paul Hester got off the tour bus in Atlanta, Georgia, and never came back.
For some reason, bands always seem to splinter and disintegrate in Atlanta, or at least split ends did. Phil Judd left in Atlanta, and Paul Hester left in Atlanta. Paul waved the bus goodbye, and, you know, it was a very strange day.
It got that close. You've got to understand, it was that close. It happened. They had hits in America. I mean, Neil can go there and sell out now, but it could have gone all the way. It could have been one of the biggest all-time bands in the world.
Paul Hester returned for the Crowded House farewell concert at the Sydney Opera House. It was a bittersweet moment that was broadcast around the country. On the night, 200,000 people turned up to say goodbye.
I thought it was incredibly ironic that the biggest crowd we ever played to in Australia was our final show.
Somewhere deep inside, something's got a hold on you. And it's pushing me aside to stretch on forever. And I know I'm right. First time in my life, and that's why I tell you, you better be home soon.
I found it kind of amusing. I was a little detached. It wasn't until, say, the last song that I realised that this is actually a very touching moment, and you know, it was really touching.
Millions of bands have #1s in America. I'm so proud that we're Australian and that we're from Brisbane and that we've done it.
She's taking time making up the reasons to justify all the hurt inside. Guess she knows from the smiles and the look in their eyes. Everyone's got a theory about...
When Darren Hayes and Daniel Jones started writing songs together, they didn't have a record deal. But they had their own recording studio in their lounge room.
The great thing about the advent of home recording equipment and how cheap it can be is that pretty much anyone with a pretty rudimentary knowledge of computers can record something of a digital standard. So you can have a fantastic Pro Tools, you know, studio, but if you don't have soul, or if you don't have a producer or an engineer or somebody who is able to recognise when soul is in the room, when God walks in the room, that's when you press record. We sent out at least 150 demos, and I'm sure somewhere on file we have 149 rejection letters. That's the truth. You know, every single one would come back with thanks but no thanks. You know, John Woodruff was the only person that was interested. And I remember when we met him, we were playing him like, we had a lot of offers and we're just going to consider yours. But now I look back and shudder and realise that he knew that all of his mates had passed on.
It was a pop band in the middle of the grunge era. I mean, that's a large reason why the companies I spoke to passed on it. You know, all this grunge music around, there's a pop band. It's like, well, what is this? And I just went, yeah, but hang on, guys, listen to the songs.
Well, I always sound so arrogant when I say this, that none of the success was a surprise at all. And I think that most people who have seen a dream come to fruition will probably tell you that, because there really aren't accidents. I was, and Daniel was, completely obsessed and diligent about the dream. You know, there was no room for failure.
So can we find out?
Savage Garden's debut album went to #1 at home and stayed there for 14 weeks. The longest since Skyhook's Living in the 70s more than 20 years before. But the band was still focused on America.
I remember flying from Brisbane to New York probably 15, 16 times. Next thing, next thing, next thing. You know, go, keep going, win, keep your chin up, do it. It's only now that I sit back and think, wow, maybe there was some luck involved in some of that, you know.
Oh, can you see it, baby? You don't have to close your eyes, 'cause it's standing right before you. All that you need will surely come.
Kylie deeply broke Savage Garden in America and became their first US #1. Their debut album has now sold over 10 million copies around the world.
I wanna stand with you on a mountain. I wanna bathe with you in the sea.
Your name is German, bold, italic. I am a typeface, which you have never heard before, which you have never seen before.
By the mid-90s, Kylie was taking increasing risks as she distanced herself from her old Hit Factory days. GBI, German Bold Italic, a song about life as a typeface, seemed one gamble too many. This time, Kylie's experimenting came at a price. The hits started to fall away and critics circled for the kill.
Actually, people ask me a lot, did you think it was all over? And not in an egotistical way, just in a natural way. I just thought, well, no, there's things I have to do. I never thought that was it.
I wouldn't ever underestimate the steel that's underneath Kylie's surface, you know.
Beginning with Parlophone, and I had to work that record a lot throughout Europe to remind people, well, I guess to reintroduce myself. And it was called a comeback, and I didn't mind that at all.
Can't Get You Out of My Head was a huge hit in Britain and Australia. Most importantly, it propelled Kylie back to the top of the US charts.
She has just become a household name. I mean, I think Kylie Minogue, in a way, is Princess Di to Australia.
The Australian public took to Kylie because she's a quintessential Australian girl. And I think that's very much still the case. I think now the world loves her because she's got a beautiful naivety to her and an authenticism that's pretty hard to recreate in a lot of artists.
Kylie has managed to have the right song and the right look, not just once, but time and time again. In an industry renowned for its fickleness and disposability, her continued success is proof that the reality can sometimes match the glittering pop dream, and even exceed it.
If you enjoyed tonight's program, join our online forum with special guest Todd Hunter at abc.net.au/love.
And you can find the Love is in the Air CD and book at ABC shops and centres.